Well, good morning or good evening or good afternoon or very late good night for some of you on the other side of the world. Very happy to be here with you. Employee engagement in a hybrid work environment. As the last few years have proven that hybrid is now a thing that is here to stay. And working out how to do it the best you possibly can, working out how to thrive in a hybrid environment is something that we all need to get better at, obviously. But not just doing it so that we do better or be okay with it. My goal here today with you is to help you see how hybrid can not only be an okay thing, but how it can actually improve engagement, improve growth, and improve the productivity of the people in your organization. And obviously, that's a big part of what we're aiming to achieve. So as you join us here today, if you can jump in the chat window and let us know where you are calling in from or dialing in from, that would be fantastic. Where you're zooming in from is a wonderful thing. I'm zooming out from here in Las Vegas, Nevada, my home town, and really excited about being with you here today on this environment of changing the way we do work and changing the way we actually get performance out of that work. So let's dive right in. It's hard to think that Albert Einstein ever envisaged what we're going through today. But when you think about the way he looked at time and space, it really does, I guess, point to where we are at today. When you really start to think, oh, good to see we've got Portugal in the building, Turkey in the building, Hawaii in the building, fantastic. When you think about the way work has changed and the way we as people have changed and our needs, wants, and desires as humans, that obviously comes across into our needs, wants, and desires as workers, as business people, as employees, as team members. And that is a big part of the new shift, what people want out of their work environment today. Gone are the days when it doesn't matter what the employees want, they'll get what they get, they don't get upset. No. What we have to be thinking about today to get the greatest people is how do we attract, keep, and motivate, and therefore get high productivity out of those people. So when we look at the in-person model of business that's been around forever and a day, that really became super popular in, say, the 1950s, when the big corporation and working for the big company was sort of the ideal scenario. And it gradually started with technology and the innovations in technology. It gradually started to move away. Of course, the pandemic made it move away very fast and made us jump to a different way of thinking. And one of the more interesting aspects in my mind about that whole remote working scenario for the vast majority of employees in my companies in particular, was that it allowed us to explore how we can do this differently without any boundaries, I guess. It allowed us to think about this in a way that said, what if this was totally different? So in the chat window, just type in, what did you do during the pandemic? Did you stay in person? Did you go fully remote, or did you go hybrid? What was your way of doing it during that period? How did you shift? Now, obviously, we're seeing a move back to in-person or back to hybrid and not just fully remote, but it's really interesting to see how different companies are handling this and different businesses are handling it to make sure that they keep growing and keep the productivity high in their business. And so when we start looking at the surveys and we start understanding what's been going on out there in the world, and if we start to think of that hybrid mentality as, we've almost doubled the hybrid mentality. We've almost grown to that level. And it's really starting to think about, well, why did that happen? And how did we actually do that? So if we look at, the surveys tell us very, very clearly, right? Is hybrid here to stay? Yes. Okay. At what level is really the question. At what level will organizations work hybrid? I've seen many different examples of it where some companies are working hybrid of 3 days a week and having 2 days a week back in the office. And then you've got other companies that are saying, if you want to be fully hybrid, you can be. If you want to be, so there's so many different ways of examining that. And that's really what we're going to go through today, how to do that in the best way possible and how to make sure that we are getting the best results out of our people. Now, when we look at the high growth firms and we see the idea of what they term productivity everywhere, it doesn't matter where you are as long as there's productivity. It doesn't matter whether you're working in an airport, at a coffee shop, from home, while traveling, in the office, at a conference facility, at a conference even. It doesn't matter where you're working, as long as we're seeing productivity. That productivity everywhere model is definitely being, I guess, spread further and going into more and more companies as we go through this thing. So how do we as executives, how do we as business people use that sort of stuff? Well, when we look, and 2022 seems a long time ago, but it's not really, okay? When we tried to get a pulse of where people are at, and you say, okay, out of 4,000 respondents, pretty statistically correct number for the market that we're looking at, they would choose to have a better work-life balance than a higher pay structure. Now, this is massive when we start to think about what's going on there. So what's more important, a 20% pay rise or a 4-day work week where you're doing 10 hours a day for 4 days? You know, going to a 4-day work week is starting to seem like more and more people are saying, I'd rather do 4 10-hour days than 5 8-hour days. And, you know, and all of that sort of thing. Because when you look at that work-life balance, that's what people are looking for, especially those in high commute cities. When you look at the high commute cities, it's crazy how the voting is in the high commute cities. If you've got a city where it's going to take you an hour there and an hour back, so yeah, you might be working 8 hours. You're there for 9 if you include the lunch hour. You're there for 9, plus you're an hour travel, plus it just gets to a point of, hey, I am doing 11 hours. So why not work 4 10-hour days and do that? So we've got to start as business people thinking this through as to what are the possibilities for us. And especially as we globalize the world, you know, and start thinking about, well, how do we do that? And are the 4 days cycled? Are the 4 days the same for everybody? How do we do those sorts of things? And we'll get more into that as we go through today. And I'll give you some of my thoughts on how that is actually coming about. So when you look at enhancing performance and we go through the pandemic and we say, well, did productivity go up? Okay, and if it did, how did it? I think that's the really important question. If productivity rose, then what was it that did that? If we sit down and say, okay, these companies have said they've surpassed their goals, and they attribute a lot of it to the hybrid working philosophy, that they're getting better results out of their team are happier. And we all know for a very, well, I guess we don't all know this. Maybe we should actually all know this, but a happier team member is a more productive team member. There's no, I mean, we can debate that all day long, I guess, but all the statistics show it. And you can go back and look at a couple of my previous webinars on these subjects to see all the statistics on it. But if we think about what makes someone happier, how does that work-life balance make them happier? All of those things. And it was really interesting to watch through the pandemic, the number of people who moved to bigger residences so they could have a professional home office, so they didn't have to work from the kitchen table. They could do it in a way that worked. I know even for me and my family, the fact that we had to set our kids up, like how do we get the kids to do homeschooling and all of those sorts of things. I think a lot of people thought this stuff through. Even to the point where now we see building habits have changed, construction has changed to build home offices, whether it be for a student or a worker, but building these things in is definitely a part of it. So if we think about the employee and how do they benefit from having the hybrid work model, Mobility is key. I know one of my team members is she's raised in India and is going to work there for 3 months. It doesn't matter if she's working there or here. It just means she's going to work from the other side of the planet and be able to see her family on weekends, sort of thing. So it's a different style of how we do things in this day and age. Now, the middle one here, I think, is something that we don't really take into account. Hybrid work is almost a pay rise for people. You think of the cost of driving to and from, or commuting if it's not driving yourself. You think of the cost of eating lunch, going out versus having a sandwich at home, sort of thing, that you've already got the food there. These sorts of things are very important benefits to our team members. And again, something that needs to be thought through if you're looking at building a workforce of the future. Now, if you're just happy to stay with what is today, then that's fantastic. But if you're building for the future, you've got to be considering this. And whether you're considering this for immediate or 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you can't deny it. You can't say, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. I've got to actually start thinking about this. And again, even if it's only for part of your workforce, yes, you might be in the restaurant business and a percentage of your workforce must show up for work. Absolutely. They have to be there. But there's a percentage of your team that don't have to work from the site. And so those are some of the things. And that's where it comes to our benefits of what we're looking at. I look at the cost of real estate, and just the amount of office space needed has been reduced dramatically. And I know some people debate the improved worker productivity. I know my own experience, okay? My own experience is that I see my team members being far more productive given that they have the option to be hybrid. Just today, for example, I had one of my marketing managers in one of our companies message that her mom, who lives with her, she takes care of, is not feeling well, so she will work from home today. I know that her level of productivity will probably be higher at home for 2 reasons. One is she will feel like needs to do some more. That's just sort of the nature of humans. But the second is her level of interruption will be a lot lower. There won't be people around the office interrupting her with things, so she will get through a lot more. Now, that's not saying I don't want her in the office at times. We'll get to more on that in just a moment. Retention, hybrid model has been shown. The studies are very clear on that. The bigger talent pool. This one, I think, is one of the most beneficial, and I've realized this in multiple ways. Having the ability to have both hybrid and remote work has allowed us to employ people from opposite sides of the country, opposite sides of the planet. It just means that we have a far greater way to go out and recruit people that will work with us. Lower cost, we've covered that one off. Improved visibility of senior leaders for employees. Let me explain that one to you, because I think this is an important one. What we found during the pandemic was that leaders turned to video far greater than they'd ever done before. Leaders turned to communication to the masses of their team far greater than they did before. An executive who usually would have only met with somewhere between 12 and 30 of their people in the organization on a regular occurrence were using Zoom and using Teams and using all of the different methodologies of video to communicate across their entire organization on at least a monthly, but many of them on a weekly or daily basis. So it increased accessibility to those senior team members or senior leaders in an organization, and it allowed leaders to get their message directly to their team members from that perspective. I want to also touch on society, because I think it's as an engage and grow business, you are definitely a forward-thinking company that does take the benefits to society into account. Obviously, emissions. The commute emission is very high. Reduction of carbon footprint should be important to every business today. Every business should be thinking about that. And if they're not, then obviously they're not a forward-moving business. You've got to be thinking about where the market is going to be in 3 to 5 years' time. I believe the market already is in carbon footprint, but if you're not, then you need to be at least moving in that direction. higher employment rates in different markets. And it's really interesting to watch where I was just with an accounting firm the other day, and they were struggling to get accountants in their hometown. And I was chatting with them about this hybrid remote style working. And I said, well, why does it matter where the accountant is? And they said, well, that we need them here for relationships to the client. I said, no, you need a human here for relationships to a client. The accounting can be done by anyone, anywhere on the planet. So it definitely brought about that level of thinking for them. And healthier. One of the things that I've looked at and I think is really important, one of my team in one of our companies, they're an all-female team in that particular business. And they started Her Days on Fridays, which is for them the happy, healthy day of the week. And so it's really a day where the team members get to take care of themselves. They've gone to a 4-day work week. They've given a Her Day and they're increasing productivity dramatically, but they're also encouraging their team to be healthier, working out, doing the things that need to be done to keep themselves in a great state so that when they are at work, they are at peak performance level. So I think these things are very important to us and need to be considered. All right. So hybrid work. Let's focus on the 5 key questions, then we'll get to some answers around those 5 key questions, okay? Where are the employees working now? Where will they work in the future, okay? What happens if organizations don't support or remote flexibility? Why do many remote-ready employees prefer hybrid work? And what will the future work week look like? How can we make hybrid work more productive and engaging? Okay, so let's dive into, and then we'll come back to the answers to all of these questions, okay? Let's dive into this point. When people are working in a hybrid environment, if they're surveyed, are they more productive, okay? Employees report that they're 87% productive, okay? So they're not saying they're, and if you look at productivity in the workplace versus in the hybrid workspace, there is often more productivity because of the less interruption factor in that workspace. There's often more productivity because there is just a straight up, let's get it done type thing. But if we go backwards, and let me go back to those questions just for a second. Where are employees working now? Where will they work in the future? Okay, we know through all the surveys that the future of work is more globalized or nationalized than it's ever been before. We know that having people work across the planet started in the 2000s with, call centers in India and all of the different things, the production capability of Japan back into the 80s. We know that there is a globalization of what's going on, but the globalization of employment is now here and here to stay. So we know that employees are not going to all be working in the same city when they work together. So an organization that doesn't support remote flexibility is going to find it harder and harder to get good people. They just are. They're going to find it harder because of finding local talent, because a lot of that local talent will be able to work for a company on the other side of the planet. They'll be able to work for a company on the other side of the country. You know, I sit here and I look at wage differential, and again, I think the surveys are starting to really show the wage differential, for a New Yorker versus someone in the middle and central of the United States, for someone working in Turkey versus someone working in London. The cost of living is now going to be taken into account because, well, hang on, you don't need to work here. Many of the big organizations, especially tech companies based in Silicon Valley, have had pay downgrades for people because if you choose to work virtually, depending upon where you move to, it changes your cost of living. So that's actually been happening. So that's the thing. And the other reason it's going to be hard if you don't support flexible or remote or hybrid work in the very least is you're going to find there's a percentage of people that only want to work that way. They don't actually want to take a job where they have to go to an office 5 days a week for 9 hours a day and do that sort of work. Why do remote-ready employees prefer hybrid work? Well, all the reasons we've listed previously, plus what it shows them about a company, what it shows them about your organization is that you are actually forward thinking. You know, if we're sitting here today in a company that still insists, it's like a company that still insists on wearing suits and ties to work versus a company that allows a relatively relaxed dress style. It just shows the new team members where the organization's mindset is at. Okay, I was looking at a website yesterday of a venture capital firm that was talking with us about one of our businesses. And literally, when you look at their team, it's like, hang on, why is it that there are 40-something guys and 2 women on your team? That tells me a lot about that organization and where they're going. The same as remote-ready organizations share a lot and show a lot. What will the future work week look like? That's the old how long is a piece of string question. Let's just say there's only one word that we can guarantee will be a part of the future work week: flexibility. That is the word that describes the future work week: flexibility. To stop someone visiting their family because, oh, you can't work. Yes, they can work from there. Productivity anywhere, gang. That should be your motto going forward. And engage and grow. Productivity anywhere is our motto. We literally are a 100% virtual organization, which I love the fact that our team can be anywhere in the world and they are still on our team. How can we make hybrid work more productive and engaging? That's really what I want to go into for the rest of our time here today. As I said, people still state that they have that. But the challenge is a lot of leaders don't see it. So we're going to have to help leaders understand and have full views of their team. So let's think about this. Team member works from home. They get an idea at 9 o'clock at night. They go and spend half an hour actually working on that idea at 9 o'clock at night. Yes, when people have the ability to do hybrid work, they will work from home. They will do that extra half hour when they get the idea type thing. It will happen. Stress and job satisfaction, just the stress of getting up and going to the office, getting home, all of those things, that will be reduced, all of those things. The work-life balance gets in. Physical and mental health is a big part of it. When they're happier, they're more productive. There's no 2 ways about it. And, you know, let me be blunt. My team members, I believe my team members are smart enough to work out that, hey, yes, I have to pick my kid up from school at this time of the day, but yes, I need to make up that work time at another time of the day. You know, if you don't trust them to be smart enough to work that, then maybe you shouldn't have them on your team in the beginning. They definitely are. So let's think about the employee engagement 6 steps, okay? If we take a look through the 6 steps, when we are changing anything in our organization, we need to go through these 6 steps. You know, when I come in, or when we come into your organization and help you with your engagements of the organization, and we grow through these 6 steps, and then say you move to a full hybrid work environment, we need to go back through them again. We need to use these 6 steps for all major changes in an organization. When we see a corporation buy out another company, we need to go through this process again, because the evaluation and the buy-in is happening from your team. When you change to a hybrid work environment, when you change to a let's go back to, all of those things, it's definitely needed to change. So if we go through this whole developing a high-performance team with the 6 steps, going through Equality, Unity, Trust, Truth the first time to bring your organization into that engagement philosophy, we don't want to destroy that with massive shift, massive change. The more change that happens, the easier and faster it is to disengage. So let's think about human relationships, which is really the center of the philosophy of how do we get people engaged with each other therefore engaged with the team, therefore engaged with the organization, the mission of the organization, and therefore growing, okay? So pre-COVID, right, pre-pandemic, our team members, in the vast majority of cases, were working together. The vast majority of cases that had lunch together, been to conferences together, maybe traveled to events together, but they definitely met each other over the water cooler, all of that sort of thing. And so they got to know each other very well. Now, when we first went remote or first went hybrid, those relationships were already strong. So therefore, with the strength of relationships, when we went hybrid or when we went remote, the relationships were already there. What started to be a challenge is when companies started to employ new people who had never been together physically, never met each other. I still remember at the end of the pandemic, people coming back to work together, and several of my team members meeting another team member for the first time, and their comments were, "Wow, aren't you tall? I didn't realize how tall you were," type thing. And it's like, huh, you seem, for me, I was like, dang, I forgot the fact that human relationships do require some form of face-to-face time in that way. So stronger relationships are definitely formed in that face-to-face aspect of what we do. So if that face-to-face is a very big part of getting them feeling connected, what we have to do and think about as a hybrid work environment, as we build more hybrid and more remote into what we do, is we have to think about how do we get them face-to-face? How do we actually get them connected and do that? Is it by bringing them to the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Is it like having mandatory, maybe it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, mandatory office days, and it's work from home on Mondays and Fridays type thing? Or the other way around, you must come in on a Monday to get the week started off and fired up in the right direction. And we need you here on a Friday to finish out the week. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday might be your 3 days. There really are many different options. There's conference options, there's get-together options, there's meal options, there's, we're in a hybrid work environment, but we come together for lunch because there's less traffic, there's less thing, we can get in together, all that. There's many different ways to think about doing this and bringing your people together in a hybrid environment and still allowing a level of remote work, a level of work from home, a level of work from wherever you're at, the old productivity anywhere philosophy of today's workforce. So if we think about the negative side of that and say, okay, if we start to think about management and leadership, okay, how people are managed and how they are led, one of the biggest differences in hybrid, and we saw this at the start of the pandemic across the world, where those water cooler collisions, where those water cooler interactions, those walking down the hallway interactions led to an ability of a manager or a leader to be able to just have those short-term conversations about what's going on, ask that little question here or there. A hybrid environment doesn't have that as easily. A hybrid environment needs to build in a system of communication. The better your communication, obviously, the better hybrid works. So we have to be thinking about how are we going to use things like, Microsoft Teams or Slack. How are we going to WhatsApp each other on a more regular basis? What are we going to do to keep that communication high? Because that lack of support or that lack of transparency and communication, because in the live environment, that support just happens naturally. It happens by the fact that you're walking past. It happens by the fact that you bump into each other in the parking lot. That stuff needs to be now thought through and actually made happen on a regular basis. So we need to increase our levels of collisions, communications, and making certain that those little things don't fall by the wayside because of the fact that we've moved into a hybrid environment. So what sort of things do that? Well, human interaction. One of the greatest things about our Engage and Grow programs is helping people learn each other, is helping people get to meet each other. See, I'll use a simple example. In one of my companies, I insist that our salespeople actually go and take a customer for coffee, right? I insist that they go and either break bread, have a meal, have a coffee, do something with the customer or the potential customer. Why? When you're on a Zoom, there's very little chit chat. There's very little on a Zoom or a whatever methodology you use. There's very little, how are the kids? What's going on in life? You know, gee, you're looking well. There's very little of that. When you're having a coffee or a meal, there's, hey, did you see the hockey game on the weekend? There's those sorts of things that are far more there. And it breeds, that face-to-face definitely breeds emotion. And so it really is important for us to think this through in a hybrid environment. How do we make sure we keep up that level of emotive connection? How do we make certain that that is something that we're doing? Okay. So the old, is there no room for emotions at work? I doubt you would be on a call with me here today or on a webinar with me if you weren't already a leader that understood that emotions are part of humans and therefore part of work. Humans are the people on your team. They have emotions. It needs to be part of what we do. So as we move into a hybrid environment, it does distance ourselves, but it brings us closer. So it brings us closer in a digital world, but it may bring us more distant in a human world. So we've just got to make sure that we do that checking in factor. Even just simple things, when someone texts or WhatsApps or messages in that they need a private day, just that someone on the team actually does message them a simple thing saying, hey, just checking in on how you're doing type thing. Feelings are a part of work and it doesn't disappear with hybrid. Remember that feeling of loneliness that the pandemic brought up in employees needs to let me rephrase that. That feelings of loneliness and separation that came up through the pandemic must be removed at all costs if we want engagement. We must, as leaders and managers, make sure that we are really taking into account in a hybrid world the best of all aspects. We're not getting the worst and the worst. We're getting the best of the remote and the best of being together in that environment where we work together. So, trust. I've often been quoted as saying that if you don't trust them enough to get the job done, then why do you have them on your team? It's important for us to do that. It's important for us to think that. And so how do we gain trust with our people? How do we make sure that I think that if I can just use my own examples of the work we do is not about the place we are in. Now, in some of my companies, yes, it is. When you're in the restaurant, the person has to show up to do that work. But in so many positions, and even in our restaurant business, in so many positions, they don't need to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't need to be there for their work to get done. If you are going to move to a hybrid environment, you must build a culture of trust. The culture of trust is an absolute must if you want to build into a hybrid environment. And if that means the team studying how trust becomes a reality, if that means you working with the Engage and Grow team on that, then make sure that is a part of what you're doing. So if we think of the purpose of our business, okay, we think of the purpose of our business, moving together in one direction with enthusiasm, resilience, better performance, moving together in one direction with one purpose, with one goal, with one identity. It is vital that you and I, as leaders of our team, are very clear on where we're going, are very clear on the purpose, who we are, and why we do what we do, are at the forefront of making sure that a hybrid work environment performs and performs very well. So, as we start to come to the end of our webinar today, I'm happy to take questions on the subject. I know I did get a couple of questions sent to me beforehand. I'll deal with those as well. But if you do have any questions, please either just raise your hand and come off mute or type them into the chat window. So the debate of, well, we need rules if people are going to make this happen. We need rules. They need to abide by the rules versus, do we trust people? Do we know, like, and trust our team members? Do we give them that ability to be themselves and get the work done? It takes a lot more work in recruiting the right people. I guarantee you that. It takes a lot more work in being a compassionate leader, being an authentic leader, being a strong, decisive leader to have that level of trust for your people. That said, though, I would suggest that there needs to be some very clear guidelines. I always think of it like a fruit bowl, I guess. You know, here's the bowl. As long as the fruit is inside the bowl, it doesn't really matter where the fruit is in the bowl. If you look at our website on engageandgrow.com, you'll see a very clear copy of our agreed core values as an organization. These are our core values. This is what we agree. This is how we agree to behave as an organization. If you want to go to my other company, Action Coach, and take a look, our corporate core values, our culture document is on the website. This forms the context of our work, who we are and why we do what we do. Every organization is going to have it different. That being said, there is need for guidelines. There's need for people to have the context laid out clearly, the who we are and why we do what we do, those guidelines that we need to act on. That clarity still needs to be there. The HR clarity still needs to be there. What does my job? How do I do it? When do I report? All of those things still need to be there. But we need to give our people that level of trust, that level of knowing that they are there for the right reasons and doing their job great. So I won't put it any more than that. I think that's probably the simplest way to say that going forward, it doesn't make sense to have no rules. It doesn't make sense to be the opposite either. Somewhere in the middle, there is a great way of creating guidelines that allow people to perform at their best and allow the organization to receive the best from them. So building employee engagement was hard enough even when we're under the same roof. What happens now? I actually think it's easier now. I actually really feel deep down that employee engagement today is easier than it's ever been before because of the flexibility we have been given, or that we can choose as executives and owners. The flexibility we've been given allows us to do this more. However, we still need humans to connect with humans. Technology does not solve engagement problems. Technology can help us identify the engagement challenges. It can help us identify where we need to move, but human-to-human connection is at the center of all of the Engage and Grow programs. And it's what we believe brings people together. Yes, it's courageous to open up people into that realm. It's courageous to be a leader that really sees engagement as a high priority, to be that compassionate leader of the future. But that being said, personally, I see that we have so much more ability today to engage our people than we've ever had before. And we've got more options on how to do that, more options on that hybrid work environment than we've ever had before. And we've got more tools available, so many more tools to do that hybrid work that really does turn it into a great thing. Okay, so any questions you've got, please type them into the chat window. Make sure that I get to answer anything I can. There were 2 questions submitted on this subject beforehand. The first one was, what size company can use hybrid work? My answer to that is any size, really. I mean, when you sit back and you start taking a look at just the Engage and Grow corporate team, our corporate team is spread across the world, and it's not a massive team. Our global reach of all of our partners around the world is a massive team, but you know, with a small team, it's sometimes even easier to be in a hybrid environment. The second question, this is a little tougher. How do you, in a hybrid environment, get the ideas flowing that would normally flow just by those simple little meetings? You know, I think that you've got to, and it's weird to say you've got to systematize creativity, but you've got to systematize the conversations. You've got to systematize when people will have chats, or how they will have chats, or how they can come together to have chats about subjects. You know, very simple questions posed into a social group or a social media group where people get to chat, using video a whole lot more than you did before, making sure that when people are on a Zoom meeting, every single person must contribute. Everyone has to come off of mute and contribute something. These are some of the ways we use to make sure we keep up that level of creativity amongst people in the organization. Whew. All right, I got through that as fast as we possibly can to make sure that if you've got any questions, or that we use your time the best it possibly can. Remember, join us at engageandgrow.com. There are a bunch more webinars just like this for you to help learn, for you to share with your team, to help move the team forward and get them growing. To obviously, if they're engaged, they're growing. So we know that to be the case. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate all the things. That's the most, I guess it's the most, let me put it a different way. The world has shifted to a remote/hybrid being a condition of our future workforce. Our future workforce will be insisting upon remote and hybrid. So we need to be thinking about it right now and evolving our decision-making right now. Thanks for being with us here today. Appreciate it. Keep engaging and keep growing.